Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan Pavlov. I'm a software developer in our company working in Sofia. Today, I have a pleasure to present you implementation details of Memento. I guess some of you are already familiar with Memento, but anyway, I should say a few words about what Memento is. Memento is an application which reminds developer about missing tracking in Slack. So here is a screenshot of Memento doing its job. Memento checks previous working day in the morning, and if you have not filled tracking, it sends a notification. It checks current day in the evening and kindly asks you to fill your tracking if it's not full. If everything is fine, it sends a motivation message to you. Memento knows that current day is not a working day for you and doesn't perform any action on these days. You can see that on 1st of November, Mikhail didn't get a notification because it was a holiday in Russia. Behind the scenes, it collects statistics for everyone nightly. This project started with Mikhail's idea and my desire to develop with new technologies. We've committed for this project in my PPR goals, and someday I just started implementing it. That's the beginning of Memento story. So what did we use to implement it? If we want to try a new thing with development itself, why wouldn't we try a new CI tool? We saw something new Jetbrains announced and decided to try this thing. As for language, we decided to choose Kotlin because it attracted me the most. Kotlin is interoperable with Java, so you can use everything you use with Java. We picked Spring Boot because we didn't want to overcommit with new technologies and stuck for weeks. Same goes for HTTP client. We use declarative approach with OpenFeign in our project, and it has great integration with Spring, which looks like Spring controller, but it's actually client. We needed some form of administrator interface where we can change reminders, generate metrics reports, etc. The simplest possible solution in Java is using Vaadin. Some of our projects use it, but usually it's 7th or 8th version, which are a bit outdated. We picked a new Vaadin 14, which was completely rewritten. For testing purposes, we use pretty standard stack of technologies. We use JUnit 5, we use some Kotlin assertion library called strict, and test containers. Let's go back to the first point, Jetbrains Space, and talk about it a little bit more. Have you ever thought how many applications and browser pages you need for a single project? Personally, I hate switching between all this stuff like Confluence, Jira, Bitbucket, Slack. Space solves this problem, but by putting everything in a single workspace. So you can see that here is chats, to-do lists, projects, etc., calendar administrator, interfaces, favorite projects, and anything you can need. Have you had that situation when you discuss one task in Slack and another person starts discussing another task and you have to use message forwarding or threads or even create separate chat manually to discuss this particular task? In Space, there is always a chat which is linked to a task you have. So you don't have to bother and can always see the whole discussion's history in this chat. At work, my teams have an agreement that when you resolve a command left in your PR, you should reply with done command on it. In Space, there is built-in feature for this. So you can click resolve on command and it will be marked as resolved. and you can reopen it again later if it's not actually resolved. Another useful feature is the ability to pick commits you need, so you can review only those things you want to review. Space has some leaking features and it provides others. For example, we couldn't run our tests with test containers because tests are executed inside of Docker container and there is no way to run Docker container inside another one. On the other hand, infrastructure as a code approach allows to easily integrate with other features in Space. You can write CI script which will post build status to a specific chat with just few lines of code. And this is actually Kotlin code. So here is job, which has container inside. And in this container, there is Kotlin script API. And we use Gradle build command. And if something goes wrong, we send a message to CI channel. Also, there are open API docs to easily integrate anything you want, and you can even try it right there and generate some code for some particular request. So here is the interface. So we can choose some data and it will generate some code or CURL or JavaScript code, which we can copy and paste to whatever we need. But I cannot recommend using it for production for now. It's not so mature to be used like that. And we didn't get a feeling that it was a good product. That's it about Jetbrains products for now. Let's move on to integrations. We easily integrated with HRBO and Jira, as they both provide REST API. If you really want to build something based on such APIs, you just have to talk to HRBO team and discuss what you need. Special thanks to Andrei Karpov and Maxim Apomovich. They helped us with that integration. Another integration is Slack. Slack has nice SDK for Java and you can build any bot by yourself easily. It also has integrations with popular JVM frameworks like Spring Boot, Micronaut, Gator, etc. I just want to show you how easy it is. So here is a simple example for Spring Boot, which consists of few lines of code. And I don't want to describe everything you see on this slide. I just wanted to emphasize that it is simple. Okay, we've talked about our integrations. It's time to speak about Memento itself. I mentioned the administrator interface, the thing most of you have never seen. Here we have different metrics we generate, and you can refer to Mikhail's speech where he showed visualized metrics and the results of project itself. In my opinion, Vaadin 14 looks like modern website comparing to its 7th or 8th versions. So we didn't configure any styles here, it's just default theming for Vaadin 14. Let's have a look at problems we faced during development. At first, we tried to write our own models for Slack integration. It worked well, but someday we found that Slack SDK was released, which could cover much more than we had at the moment. Our code was tightly coupled to our written external entities. And to refactor that, we had to rewrite a lot of classes and corresponding tests completely. In such cases, it would be better to make logic independent on external objects. Instead, it would be better to define a boundary and map external objects to your internal entities so that external objects depend on your model. It allows concentrating on logic and test things we really care about. We don't want to test external objects because we can't control them. This way we could migrate to Slack SDK easier, but it was a little bit too late when we realized it. And we learned from mistakes, and now we're applying such pattern at everyday work. Another problem we met was tests. In my opinion, it's important to have tests in PoC because it evolves fast and changes often lead to bugs. We started writing unit tests for our service classes, which contains business logic. We got some code coverage pretty much for PoC more than 75% and thought that it was enough. Memento grew really fast. New features were needed. Old features had to be adjusted with new ones. And we constantly refactored things like classes, modules, dependencies between them. Architecture was changing a lot. Unit tests became a burden. We lost flexibility and our code became rigid, and each change was a pain. Actually, there was a better way with which we can be more flexible. We could avoid these problems by writing tests for the widest available scope, which cover one feature from top to the bottom. Such tests help us to concentrate on what we expect our app will do in some case, instead of what this particular function or class will do. This way, we make sure that we test that our app works correctly and not that some part of the system works correctly. All we need is to have a proper setup to run these tests. To do that, we use test containers to test on a real database instead of a mocked one or some in-memory database. And this way, we should only mock external interfaces. That was HTTP clients, so faint clients in our case. And that's it. Such tests much slower than unit ones because they launch the whole app, but development speed is drastically increased. After writing such tests, we can easily change any internal relationships between objects, and these tests only and this changing of relationships doesn't affect input and result. So the test itself should be the same even after those changes. I can emphasize that this way tests itself can be even simpler than unit tests because we don't have to mock anything else. We can just vary inputs to Memento and expect some result from it. I will show you an example of one test we have. So the first one, you can see that function has meaningful name, which looks like human written sentence, and it's clear what we check in this test. Then we have a reminder which consists of two parts, morning one and evening one. Then we try to change user reminder, and then we have an assertion written with strict library in a fluent way. So we expect that result is an instance of error result. We are getting underlying errors, and we're checking that those errors contain reminders to close error with this time gap hours value. You can see that it's easy to write this test and it's pretty readable in my opinion. It's time for a review how we use Kotlin in Memento. The most well-known feature in Kotlin is null safety. It saves you from null pointer exception in most cases. In Kotlin, you are not allowed to use nullable type inappropriately. Compiler prevents such unsafe accesses. It also provides useful operators to work with that. So the first one, not null assertion. If you think that you're smarter than compiler, you can put it and get null pointer exception if you're actually not. Second one is safe call, which returns null if its operand is null and performs some action otherwise. The last one is Elvis operator, which returns left operand if it's not null and right operand if left operand is null. The second important but non-unique thing is any type, which is supertype of all other types, similar to Java-Lang object, or I guess almost all other languages has something similar. And the last but not least is nothing type. In my opinion, it's the most powerful type in Kotlin ecosystem. It's a subtype of each type in system. Only expressions like return or throw returns nothing. So why do we need it? In some cases, it's very helpful because it's a special type of for the compiler. If there is expression which returns nothing, then the compiler understands that workflow ends here, and that's what's happening when you use return or throw. It's definitely the end of the workflow of function. You can even use it to mark your function never completes, like while true loop. Everything that I just said allows writing a very elegant code. Let's start from the Java code. The code is pretty simple. We have some service which provides access to user by its ID. And we are trying to get user from local cache. And if user is null, we throw in an exception. And if it's not, we return user. In Kotlin, we have this single line expression function. First, we get value from map. If it's not null, then we return it. And we return right part otherwise. Error is a function which throws an exception and returns nothing. And that's why we can assign it to user type, because nothing is subtype of user. You can see that it's much easier to write such code. And if you get used to see such code, it becomes even easier to read because of absence of all this noise. We've seen some basics of Kotlin. Let's move further. In Kotlin, there is an easy way to extend class functionality without inheritance or any other design pattern. A big part of Kotlin standard library made with extensions. This way, third-party library classes could be extended too. So here you can see that we have a function which is extension function for closed range of local date type, and closed range is actually part of Kotlin standard library, so we can't control it. And the function is named iterate over days, and it simply returns local date iterator as a result. And note that this, in context of this function, is closed range of local date, the type we are defining this extension function on. Another useful feature is operator overloading. So it exists in other languages, so I don't want to describe what it does, but I show you how we use it. So here we have operator function iterator, which is common pattern. And we use it like that. So we just have a loop over closed range of local date here. It looks like a usual iterator pattern in Kotlin. Language paradigm is shifted to immutability in Kotlin. Unlike it is in Java, everything is supposed to be immutable or read-only by default. For example, if you use var modifier, which stands for mutable, IntelliJ will underline your variable to help you understand that it's not simple read-only thing. Kotlin has built-in support of data classes, similar to Lombok data annotation. It generates useful methods like toString, equals, hashcode, etc. It also generates helpful copy method, which copies object with the new state. So here you can see how easy it is to change status of immutable object. So here, new object is returned. It's not actually a mutation of object. Another example with readability and usability increased with Kotlin is domain-specific languages. I won't speak about what DSL is and why you might need it. Instead, I'll show a practical example of it. Slack has BlockKit framework, which allows constructing messages in Slack from interactive parts. Slack also has beautiful extensions for Kotlin. The most important one is exactly blocks DSL. So here is comparison again. It might not look like a significant improvement at first glance, but it really is. In the Java code, we have to declare blocks variable before we are using blocks itself. So we split our logic into multiple parts, and if we need something else, we have to declare more and more variables. In Kotlin, we don't have to do that. We can do the real code inside of this DSL. So in Java, we are mapping error text to something that Slack can understand. It's actually section block with plain text. And in Kotlin, we have this support of IntelliJ. We can have this dot something, and we will see all the possible actions here. And it allows us not to remember all these static methods. Like section here is static method. If I don't know where to get this information, I just can't properly develop this thing. And this, I just can use this dot after this and get all needed, all possibilities I need. Most of modern applications have some asynchronous interactions. Kotlin has interesting approach of solving asynchronous problems. It provides concept of suspendable function which can suspend their execution and resume later on. It's achieved via single keyword in the language design, suspend modifier for function. All other features are provided with an external library. The code that you write with coroutines looks like asynchronous code with suspend modifier. So it's easier to support such code because it's the same paradigm as you write usual code. You can run a million tasks in coroutine in parallel, and you don't get out of memory exception or something like that, comparing to threads approach. Here you can see how suspendable function looks like in our code. So there's nothing special except suspend modifier. If there is asynchronous programming, there should be a type which is stream of probably asynchronously generated elements. Here comes Coroutines flow. It's an analog of reactive publisher. It's really easy to extend existing functionality. There's only one function in flow interface, and all other things are implemented via extension functions. Here you can see how we use it. So we have some channel of elements. We are consuming it as flow. We are filtering only instances of team join event. We're mapping underlying users, and for each user we put it into service. And if some error occurs, we just log it, and that's it. And all these functions are actually extension functions, so there's nothing special defined in flow interface. We've talked enough about Kotlin pros, but nothing is perfect in this world. There are cons too, and it would be unfair to skip them. When you use some Java API, the compiler can't guess if it's nullable or not. You have risks to get a null pointer anyway. There is no way to solve this problem completely, but you can choose a concrete type at the use side. So if you put colon local date question mark, in this case, you'll definitely be protected. But if you are sure, you can put local date without question mark, so it stands for not nullable type. And if in some case Java function returns null, you will get an error here. There is no package private modifier in Kotlin. Instead, there is internal modifier, but with different meaning. Internal structures are accessible inside a single build module. Therefore, protected modifier means accessible only in children, not in every class and package. You have a possibility to mess your code with plenty of top-level functions, a million classes in a single file, or any other stuff you want to do to break everything in your code. And there are also IDE issues. Performance of IDE is definitely worse than in pure Java code base. And there are some other problems, but it's constantly improving, so it's becoming better and better with each new version. That's it about Kotlin. There are some points which are born as a result of this POC, and I would like to share them with you. Working on this project didn't take so much time for me. Actually, I had an agreement that I can use 1 working hour per day to develop Memento. In fact, I used some of my free time as well because I was motivated with that agreement. When you work on such POC, you should enjoy the process of development. This is the time when you can choose whatever you want to do and how to do it. Try something new. It allows you to have different points of view on all things and even find something really useful for your job. Let's make some summary of what I've talked about today. So the first one, Jetbrains Space, interesting CI tool, which is not production ready yet. Integration with Jira and HRBO is not a rocket science. You can do it by yourself. Learn from the mistakes you made. Apply what you learned to your work. In our case, main problems were architectural ones. They were leaking boundaries and dependency inversion, and also suboptimal testing approach. We tested Kotlin in a real world server-side application and liked how it works, so Kotlin is a good instrument for developers. Enjoy programming. Try something you've never used before and do whatever you like to do.